plays a full 4 copies of the Tapu Lele deck, so I guess it's not all that uncommon for him to see a couple of them be prized because he's definitely prepared for that situation to happen.
Yeah, this is something that Azul likes to talk about a lot, and this is the reason why he decided 4 was so important. And we actually see that Jimmy scratched it out here for us in the 4 count, so he added this last one, and it might actually be pretty important when he looks.
Yeah, no kidding. It really could be, as we see a Bridget on turn 1 here from Jimmy. Jimmy is starting things off here in this win-and-in matchup between Jimmy Pendarvis and Frank Diaz. Can't stress enough how important this match is for both of these players, as Frank is really looking to solidify himself as one of the best World Championship competitors of all time, and Jimmy is looking to make a big name for himself at the World Championships.
Absolutely. Jimmy has been doing fantastically throughout the entire year, and you see that he's got himself all the way to this stage. On the other side, Frank Diaz, he had a win-in last year as well, and unfortunately he had a judge ruling that went against him, and he ended up losing that match. So he's definitely going to be looking for a reversal of fortune here.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of actually watching Frank win his round 7 match in person, and he just immediately looked up at me after he picked up his cards and said, win-and-ins at Worlds are very dangerous for me. And yeah, of course it reminded me of that unfortunate situation for him last year.
Oh, very interesting. Over on Jimmy's side, he attached an energy to his Eevee, but did not use that energy evolution. I believe his Espeon might just be in his hand, or doesn't want to search one out of the deck right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation. I think maybe one was prized.
Could possibly.
Can't remember.
On the other side, though, looking at what Frank is able to do, he's got a Sky Return set up for himself, but that does not do very much against Trubbish. He's going to need to find some cards, perhaps with that Ultra Ball that he has in his hand, really start to get going here, because Shaman's not going to cut it.
We do see him discard a couple of cards here for that Ultra Ball. That Ultra Ball will allow him to find any Pokemon in his deck and put it in his hand. So, of course, the first obvious choice is something like a Tapu Lele, some sort of a setup Pokemon. Maybe find himself a Bridget or something along those lines for himself. This is a really interesting matchup, and actually a really fitting matchup to end our Swiss rounds, as we have both top-tier versions of Garbodor, at least what people consider to be the 2 best Garbodor variants coming into Worlds, between the Drampa Garbodor here from Frank and obviously the Espeon Garbodor from Jimmy. It's kind of a little bit of a showdown, and I guess fittingly enough, there's the Garbodor that has the Golisopod, from the Japanese contingent, and that's not featured on this particular stream, but we've definitely featured it throughout the weekend.
Yep. Frank here, he's just going to get himself 30 damage dealt onto that Trubbish and pick that Shaman back up. Unfortunately, this means that Frank has no energy in play, just a Drampa with a Floatstone. And Jimmy, he was holding on to that Espeon. We see the Espeon GX hitting the board here. And really, he can just start to control the game however he pleases. He has options like an N in his hand. He has Tapu Lele if he wants to search for a different supporter. Looks like he's just going to try to find a Floatstone here, or potentially a double colorless energy if he has to. Just got to get that Trubbish out of the active and confuse his Drampa.
How many Floatstones does he play? It seems like he plays the full 4. It's anytime I look into his list, it's always a 4 of.
Yeah.
But it seems like he plays the full 4, which actually just makes it very consistent and makes it very difficult for him not to find it. So I would be surprised if he doesn't find a Floatstone here. He gets a fresh hand of 6. And color me surprised, because he does not have it in his hand, and he doesn't have the double colorless energy.
Doesn't even find an energy.
Yeah. So it looks like we're not going to be seeing an attack here from Jimmy Pendarvis, and he may be forced to just end his turn after contemplating for a half a second there. And now it's back on Frank, who has got to be feeling very thankful for this kind of a situation, even though his setup is just obviously not exciting.
Yeah, Frank likes to slow the game down, but he needs to be attaching energies at the same time. He wants to get energy acceleration on the board just one turn at a time, and then he uses his Plumeria in order to get back into position. He'll take energies off of the bench while knocking out the active with energies, and really he can just start to dominate a board from there. But hasn't been able to find anything like that just yet, hoping that Jimmy starts to stumble here so that he can get ahead.
All right, Frank is going through his options. He does decide to get a Trubbish, shuffles his deck. Frank, like you said, he's definitely trying to slow the game down here. it's Jimmy who's kind of come off to this super fast start, and given Frank's board and the fact that he has no energy in play, there's no real way for his Garbodor or his Drampa to start pressuring Jimmy. And at this point, I really want to start keeping track of how many items are in both players' discard piles, as we are keeping track of Frank's, but we haven't been keeping track of Jimmy's so far.
We are keeping track of Jimmy's. It's at 0.
I guess that explains things.
Yeah, he has inadvertently played fantastically in this matchup. Just never going to let Trash Lance do anything.
Well, that's definitely true. As Trash Lance is currently sitting at a very, very pitiful 0 damage for Frank Diaz. Triple Trubbish, though, to accompany that Shaman.
Yeah.
You see a double colorless energy in Frank's hand, right as I say that, it comes down onto the Drampa. But it's just, I mean, what are you going to be doing? Dealing 20 damage to the
I think he's going to big wheel.
Big wheel.
That's a much better plan, and he sure indeed does. Big wheels, which means that it's on Jimmy here to find an end. But before he even does that, we see a Field Blower. That's the first item in Jimmy's discard pile, and here's the second.
Yep, and now Jimmy's got that N.
It looks like it should be 2. Yep, there we go. 2 items in the discard pile here for Jimmy. And more importantly, the N is shuffling both players' hands back into the deck, and both players are going to be drawing 6 cards, which obviously is very important against a Drampa who just big-wheeled.
That's right. Now, Frank, because he lost that Float Stone, this means that if Jimmy is able to confuse this Drampa, just with the sheer amount of just how awkward confusion is and how many items Frank has played this game, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Trash Lance really starts to add up here, being that it's already at 120, and the fact that confusion is going to do 60, that math works out pretty perfectly against the Drampa GX.
Oh, man. Things are just, even though the prizes haven't really been exchanged or anything like that, things are really looking up here for Jimmy, as this early game has gone definitely in his favor, just based on the number of items in the discard pile for Frank.
Well, now Jimmy's going to add to that collection a little bit, and he's up to 4 now. Ultra Ball, discarding an Ultra Ball. But he does get himself a Trash Lance Garbodor, so that is one positive note there. It looks like, once again, he's not going to be able to get his Pokemon out of the active spot, so he's just going to start to go in with his Garbodor here. Trash Lance should be doing 120 damage, and that's a nice chunk of change against the Drampa.
Would you have rather seen a Psybeam here or that Trash Lance?
Well, he would. He has no way to retreat, so he would.
Well, I guess what I meant was, like, would you have preferred to see a Psybeam had he had the way?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm sure that he would have liked to as well. If the Float Stone was there, putting the confusion onto the Drampa would have been very nice.
Okay, I definitely agree there. And now Frank has a hand of 7 cards, 6 from the end from Jimmy, and 1 from his turn, the start of his turn. We see him fan Tapu Lele to the front of his hand. Has a double colorless energy and a couple of other psychic energies to go with it.
Yeah, this
Tapu Lele comes down, Wonder Tag, finding any supporter card in Frank's deck, and it looks like he's going to be going for Guzma.
Yeah, if Frank had a Garbodor in his hand, he would have had more options available to him. Maybe could have grabbed that Plumeria, taken the energy off of the Espeon GX, and then also knocked out the active Garbodor, leaving Jimmy with nothing but 2 cards in his hand, which seems pretty favorable. But since he doesn't have that, he has to take different routes here.
Looks like Frank is retreating, promoting the Trubbish.
Here's one way to take away an energy.
Well, I guess so. And he does not take away the energy, unfortunately for him, but he does deal quite a bit of damage here, as 80 damage gets pegged onto that Espeon GX.
Yeah, Choice Band really starts to add up when you involve weakness as well there. It's a nice play by Frank, being able to start to soften up this Espeon while he still doesn't have very much going on his side of the board.
And now an N here from Jimmy. He really did not like that hand. So both players shuffle back in. Both players draw 6.
Yep, now for Jimmy, he's left in a weird spot too here. He has like no Float Stone option to him. He doesn't really want to commit any more to his Espeon, and he's already used his supporter for the turn. So does he want to just confuse a Trubbish? You might have to. But now he's going to retreat here and just take a knockout on it. with his Garbodor.
Okay, he does go for that Garbodor play instead. Trashalanche dealing enough damage to that Trubbish to knock it out a couple of times. And Trubbish does hit the discard pile. But now there's a Garbodor ready to, potential Garbodor from Frank that could knock the opposing Garbodor right back out. It just depends on whether he's willing to spend that Ultra Ball as a resource, and it seems like he believes he should. At this point in time, you already have six items in your discard pile, so it's a little bit easier for you to discard another one, but you definitely want to stop your opponent from being able to one-hit KO your Tapu Leles, for example.
Right.
So it's a tough situation, but it seems like at this point he's crossed the point of no return, and Frank Diaz is just kind of going to throw caution to the wind here and discard at will and just kind of set up his potential attackers from here on out.
Yeah, this is what he has to do. He's taken he's in a prize disadvantage. His board state is not nearly as good as Jimmy's right now. The only thing that he does have an advantage in is potentially energies, but Frank just has to keep the ball rolling here. He's going to have to get more Garbodor out, and maybe this end is going to be the piece that helps him out here. Okay, that explains a lot. He has the Garbodor already in hand. I was going to say, if he needs to hit a Garbodor still off of that end, that wouldn't make too much sense. But having the Garbodor already in hand makes a lot more sense. Yeah. And down comes the end. Frank able to play out his entire hand and find himself 6 fresh cards. It's definitely beneficial.
Now, Jimmy Pendarvis just needs to get a constant stream of attackers going. He will be losing the only energy he has on the field. So this N is going to have to find Jimmy some energies, but he does have 5 cards that he gets to draw off of this N. So it's not like it's very difficult for him to do so.
Yeah, Jimmy found a double colorless energy. He's looking for psychic energy so that he can continue the Trashalanches that he has going on.
He has eyes like a hawk. I love it. All right, Tapu Lele, wonder tagging.
And this is where that teammates is going to be so great. There was a little debate between the testing group if this was going to be a card worth putting into the deck, and they decided that this was very good for Garbodor decks. When you're playing this matchup, or if you're playing the mirror matchup, you really want to have that answer for when you get into this war of Garbodors. So when you're Trashalanching back and forth, you want to make sure that you're able to stay in this.
The teammates, I guess even though we just kind of potentially got spoiled there, what cards would you have gone for the teammates?
Well, it's easy to say that Rescue Stretcher would be a great play here. He can either grab himself another Garbodor out of the discard pile or shuffle in some of the pieces if he so chooses. And it looks like he is just going to make sure he has another attacker. And of course, you need that Psychic Energy if you want to Trashalanche. So Jimmy making the right read here, getting his Pokemon ready to continue to go in this back and forth. And then he's just going to be looking to land some easy knockouts on some damaged Pokemon like that Drampa.
It looks like we have more items in the discard pile. Yep, sure enough, Judge is on top of it. And we are up to 5 items now, which is enough for a knockout onto the, not enough for a knockout onto the Garbodor, so he needs one more. So he's going to need an alternate route when it comes to attacking here, or potentially a Guzma. Looks like he's got a Versus Seeker in his hand. I think he's got a Guzma in the discard pile already.
Well, if he does get Trashalanche, he does get to play into the weakness of Garbodor, so that would be good for him. But doesn't look like he has that just yet. He's actually just going to have to end and try to find it himself.
Let's see. Well, right, but doesn't he only deal 100? Oh, wait, no, never mind.
There's that little purple ×2, my friend.
For some reason, in my own head, this is how long a day it's been. In my own head, I was like, yeah, but that's still only 100.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's been a long day.
It's all right. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here, to have a long day.
They give you a buddy to help out.
Oh, I agree with that. And they gave me the best buddy. Swable House. All right. At this point, it's a ton of items in the discard pile for Frank. That's the easiest way for us to keep track of that.
Something that I should have mentioned, well, let's see if this flip goes out. It does not go Frank's way here. But something worth mentioning, Frank, I believe, does play a 2-2 split of the Garbodors. So he's not built for this kind of exchange. And yeah, he just scoops up the cards. He drew into the wrong Garbodor. He drew into the Garbotoxin Garbodor. And that's not going to do him anything right now. So he's just going to give himself some time and give himself the best opportunity to potentially win the next 2 games here with about 35 minutes.
Yeah, that 2-2 split of Garbodor really makes him rely on finding cards like Rescue Stretcher. If he doesn't find that kind of a card, then he's just not going to have a lot of attackers for this mirror matchup. Or, well, when I call it a mirror matchup, I'm basically saying the Garbodor versus Garbodor matchup.
Yeah, it means that Frank might have to go with alternate routes of just focusing on Drampa as his main attacker and starting to target down Tapu Leles and anything else that he can knock out. Maybe if he can start to chip into an Espeon, he can take that out as a knockout. Focus on 3 GX knockouts and try to win the game that way, because he has a difficult time keeping up with what Jimmy was able to do there.
Yeah, I think a lot of this game had to do with the fact that Frank started off with that Shaman.
Yeah, it was bad.
He was forced to Sky Return on the first turn, which left him with no energy in play. And that's just really, really important when your opponent is putting that kind of pressure on you. Remember, not only did he have to Sky Return, but he also had to Sycamore away a couple of item cards. He had a lot of things go his opponent's way in that early game, and that kind of forced him into a prize exchange that he just wasn't prepared for. So Jimmy Pendarvis takes game 1 here, and Jimmy is actually 1 game away from becoming a top 8 competitor at the World Championship. So very, very big game here for him.
Yep, got to keep the nerves in check. Make sure that basic Pokemon he put down was what he needed there. And time for the prize cards over on Jimmy's side. Let's see if game 2 is going to be as kind to him as game 1 was. And it looks like that's not terrible. 2 Professor Sycamore in the discard pile, but the Bridget, yeah, that's right. That will be, that could be pretty impactful.
Yeah, you never really want to see that Bridget in your prizes, but in certain situations you just flat out don't need it. So
right,
that could definitely be the case in this game. We'll have to wait and see. We'll also have to wait and see if Frank finds a Pokemon. It looks like he found a Drampa.
Yep. And Frank's
just see if Frank's prizes are...
Gives us all the prizes.
All right. So, Shaman, Double Colorless, Kuzma. These are fine prizes.
Yep.
I definitely expect to see a much closer game, game 2 here. And Frank going first is also very important for him, as if he has an Ultra Ball here, so he can definitely start setting up some basic Pokemon. But instead, he actually has the Tapu Lele already, so he didn't even need the Ultra Ball here. Potentially seeing a Bridget here from Frank.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if that's the right play here, honestly. He needs to have an energy card to really make this worthwhile. We might just see him using the Tapu Lele, finding another supporter that he doesn't really want, and then using an N. Because he needs to get energies onto the board. We saw how that messed him up last game.
And using that Ultra Ball for Trubbish, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that.
He might also just...
Oh, maybe not even use the Ultra Ball and not play down too many items.
What if he Bridgets, uses the Ultra Ball for Shaman, and then finds an energy? How great would that be?
Isn't Frank's Shaman prize?
I did not see if that was true.
There was one Shaman prize. I can't remember if it was for Frank or for...
he might be it. I think he's the only one who plays
he's the
Shaman.
only one playing Shaman, so it is prize for Frank.
Oh, Frank is going to find himself a Trubbish.
All right, looks like we see at least one item hit the discard pile for Frank already. If he can keep that number of items low, say up to 3-ish, then he'll still be fine. But the moment that you enter, that 4+ range, that's when things start to get a little bit tricky. Tricky.
3 is actually the scary number, because 60 to 120 is the knockout in the Garbos. But yeah, you really do want to watch how many.
Looks like he's going to Sycamore here, so it may be already at that number 3.
Yep, and then it might just be his strategy here. Just go aggressive, use your Drampas, and you know that you're not going to win the Garbo.
Did he have access to N? He did, right?
Yeah, he discarded it with the Sycamore.
Okay, we'll have to see. And we actually don't know how many items are in the discard pile yet, so.
Yeah, well, Jimmy's side now, having an Eevee is nice. Having Energy Evolution there available to you is great too. You get to grab your Espeon, but you really don't like the fact that you're going to confuse a Pokemon with a Float Stone on it. So if Jimmy was able to find a card like Field Blower, he would feel like this was a lot more impactful for him.
Now an Ultra Ball from Jimmy, discarding only an Ultra Ball as the relevant item.
Yeah, this is where he's going to look for likely a Tapu Lele for a Bridget, but he's going to get the bad news that his Bridget is prized, so might have to go with an alternate route.
Well, he finds the Tapu Lele before he even looks for the Bridget.
Always got to find a supporter. Actually, looking at Guzma, he wants to confuse this Drampa, I believe. He's got a Float Stone for his Tapu Lele, so although it is promoted, he can just bring it right back, and he can start to apply some pressure to Frank here, confusing the Drampa with the energy, and the Float Stone's on the wrong Drampa now.
Yeah, that's very important. A Guzma can bail Frank out as well as a couple of other cards, but you're absolutely right. Now, it looks like they're getting a count of the number of items. We finally get the spoiler that it was only one item. So, a lot of supporters. Much stronger start here for Frank, as both players only have a single item in their discard pile.
Frank
Garbodor
does have a Garbodor available to him this game.
Second item.
And he just wants to get rid of all of this. He is up to 2 items in the discard pile, so one more is going to be pretty dangerous for him. Is luckily able to find that Float Stone, though, that's going to sneak his Drampa out of the active spot if he so chooses.
I don't see it. Do you? Maybe it's the last card?
Yeah, he moved it over. I believe that this turn could be pretty great for him.
It is the last card in his hand.
He could use this Float Stone and move to the other Drampa, attach to it, and if he wants to use Big Wheel, that's available to him. If he wants to put a little chip damage into the Espeon to work into that 180 damage range later, that's available to him too also.
Lots of options here.
Or this.
It's not an option I was considering myself, but it also makes sense.
Yeah.
You hit your opponent for weakness.
It's 100 damage, and although you don't think about Trash Lance when there's only one item in the discard, Frank says, I'm not going to win a Trash Lance fight, so I might as well use it while I can.
And I like that play a lot more than I like Big Wheel, too. Your hand is actually fine, so you don't really necessarily need the Big Wheel, you know?
Yeah.
So you might as well put pressure on your opponent, force Jimmy to make the move himself, and it's not like your opponent can just kind of Trash Lance you back.
Yeah, this may line up awkwardly for Frank if Jimmy just does decide to confuse the Garbodor right off the bat. Then he's left stuck, stranded with his Garbodor. He's already has 2 Float Stones down, and he has a Choice Band on his Garbodor, so he'd have to find some switching options for himself too.
Right, he'd have to probably Guzma into the Tapu Lele, which, I mean, would obviously slow him down, but still, the damage has been done to that Espeon.
Or you flip for it.
That is actually really true. That's something that people don't really consider very often.
Yeah, we saw Tordy. Yeah, he was able to flip a few heads for himself. It happens.
Sometimes you just have to, just do it.
Jimmy's going to eye up any possible options for himself here. Has a double colorless energy in his hand, so if he wants to get aggressive, he, of course, can attach that to his Espeon and take a knockout on this Garbodor, but doesn't think that that's going to be the best play for himself. Just going to play that energy onto the Tapu Lele and use N here.
All right, second item for Jimmy. One item away from that crucial number 3 that you were talking about. It looks like Frank's already hit that number.
Yeah, and I mean, that means that if there were to be Trash Lances back and forth, Jimmy is in a pretty good spot. That is something that Jimmy would like to do during this game. It worked fantastically for him in the opening game, but I don't know if Frank's going to play that anymore. He just wants to use Drampas.
Who will be able to join the ranks of Raiji, Pablo, Naoto, and Diego here? Will it be Frank Diaz or will it be Jimmy Pendarvis? Jimmy up 1-0 against Frank with 25 minutes remaining, but I mean, it's still anybody's ball game here, as Frank is definitely putting up a huge fight against Jimmy in the second game.
Yeah, awkward spot here for Frank. He does have the option to use the Ultra Ball for a Tapu Lele. He could find himself a Guzma and get himself out of the active spot, but I don't know if that does much for him. So he's actually just going to play down a Trubbish into that 5th spot on his bench, filling up his bench here, and we might be seeing him flip for it. I mean, you might as well. The 30 damage isn't going to be too impactful, and you're just going to get knocked out next turn.
Oh, he's going for it.
He's like, which dice should I choose?
He's going for it. This is a big-time trash avalanche. Will he hit it?
Yes.
Big hit here for Frank, and you see him fist pump. You know that was a very important flip for him. He knew that potentially his tournament was on the line with that flip, and sure enough, the flip came up heads at the most opportune moment for Frank Diaz, as he is now up 4 prizes to 6 against Jimmy Pendarvis in what might have been the most important flip of this tournament so far.
Absolutely. That was the difference of 100 damage, a knockout. This Tapu Lele being promoted means that it's now vulnerable to an attack that may not have even happened. So crazy how just that one die is really going to affect this game here.
Now, Jimmy Pendarvis has to not let this phase him too much. He did get unlucky here in this situation. He did what he could to prevent this from happening, but Frank did not back down. He did not show weakness. He decided to go for this big play that could have just either spelled the end for his tournament or could have spelled the end for Jimmy Pendarvis in the second game. And in this particular case, it went Frank's way, but Jimmy has to maintain composure here, as he seems to be doing so, as we see, take a look at Jimmy's concentration. And now it's on Jimmy to kind of make sure that this doesn't get out of hand. His opponent has a much stronger field than him, but that's not the end-all be-all here.
Jimmy's hand is pretty terrible. Yeah, he drew into a few energies. He's got a float stone, a rescue stretcher, but no Tapu Lele in there. So yeah, he needs to find some help out of his prize cards.
All right, so now Jimmy Pendarvis
Looks
does
like he
knock
found
out
the
Frank's
Bridget.
Pokemon, though. Frank's Trash Lanch and Garbodor is down. And remember, Frank does play a very interesting number of Garbodors here, so losing a single one is very important.
Yeah, the 2-2 split means that Rescue Stretcher is just all that important. You might not be able to get to pick and choose. You might have to shuffle in multiple Garbodor at the same time in order to get full effect out of that. But fantastic Guzma here for Frank. Not only is he able to start to attach some energies to these Drampas that he's going to focus on, but he can remove a Trubbish that would be a potential Garbodor for Jimmy now. And Jimmy's going to be just left with this Tapu Lele, which can't really attack cleanly into this Garbodor.
Another big play here for Frank is Trubbish hits the discard pile here for Jimmy. And Jimmy is, while he is only down a couple of prizes, just look at the board difference. Look at just how much Frank has built up. He hasn't even used his Drampas yet in this game. And both of them have an energy attached to them already. So a double colorless way for each of these Drampas, as well as this Garbodor, which Jimmy's going to have a really hard time keeping up with. Even though he only has 3 items in his discard pile, that's still 60 damage onto a non-Psychic Weak Pokemon. And if you lay down a Trubbish, it's in danger of it getting Guzman right up.
Yeah, all of these Trubbish are going to be in danger. He can't play Eevees anymore. He doesn't want to ever get out that Espeon GX. That's a huge liability so late in the game. And this is where you start to see how the matchup shifts. If he's playing Drampa, then he does have this option available to him. Now, basically, the whole Eevee line doesn't do very much.
You see, he has to play the... Man, really been a long day. Bridget. He has to play the Bridget. And just finds 3 basic Pokemon. And that's kind of the end of his turn. All he can really do is Energy Drive for 60 damage. Not ideal against a deck that's already a couple of prizes ahead of you. Yeah,
this is not a spot that Jimmy wants to be in. And this is where you start to think about time. He knows he has at least maybe 20-25 minutes to win another game, and this one really isn't going his way. If Frank had like 7 items in the discard pile, you can start thinking about ways to come back, but this just isn't going how he wants it to.
Field Blower gets rid of that Floatstone on Jimmy's side of the field, so that's now 4 items in the discard pile here for Jimmy.
Yeah, that's 6 also for Frank, so it actually is starting to go in his favor. But if Frank is going to do this means that he probably has a pretty big play lined up for him, and it is going to be that Shaman drawing a lot of cards.
It looks like it draws him 5 or 6 cards here, and he is up to a 6-card hand. That's a lot of energies in his hand, but none of them are double colorless.
He does have Guzma in his hand, which means he can target down that Trubbish with the Psychic Energy if he wants to. He also maybe has a Plumeria in his discard pile. There's a plenty of options for him. But yeah, he's going to target down that Trubbish and try to clear that off the board.
Now, the problem with this is he does not have the double color synergy to attack with the Drampa GX.
Yeah, he's going to retreat.
Yeah, which means he's going to have to attack with the Garbodor. And that's his final Garbodor. That's his final Trash Lynching Garbodor. He's going to have to find that Rescue Stretcher.
Yeah, it's definitely a card that we're going to have to look out for. He might also just be trying to eye down those last 2 prizes on the Tapu Lele. He has a Drampa with a Choice Band and 2 energies already, so just the Psychic might be enough if he's able to hold on to that via Seeker. Jimmy just mulling over what's in his discard pile here for himself, and it looks like he might have to just hope that there's no more Garbodor either. He's going to think about Espeon here.
Yeah, I could definitely see that Espeon being the card that he goes after here. Though
he may also have some Tapu Lele Guzma plays lined up too. It's hard to tell here. A lot of options for himself. Yeah, he's going to eye up an N, and it makes the Eevee promotion a little suspect.
It does. Oh,
but, well,
less
Floatstone makes it a lot better.
Yeah. Now, he has a Choice Band that he can still attach before he decides to end, as well as a couple of, well, a double color synergy.
Yeah, and this is a big risk for Jimmy. He knows that he has to make plays like this if he's going to stay in the game, but really just 1 energy is going to be enough for Frank.
1 energy away from Frank winning this game and taking it to game 3. Wouldn't be surprised for Frank to just kind of show him that energy if he does draw it, just to speed things up here, as a draw would be terrible for these players.
Yeah, even the Frank having access to his big wheel if he needs to. He's not in danger of prize cards affecting him when Jimmy has 5 left, so he's got plenty of turns to get himself into this spot that he needs to be.
Couple of cards here for Frank. Is one of them an energy?
It looked like a double colorless.
It did to me too.
Jimmy is going to find himself that Trash-a-Lanch Garbodor.
Is it a double colorless? We'll see. Okay, so
yeah, let's see if my Hawkeyes were right or not. Oh,
it is. Versus Seeker. Well, he doesn't even need the Versus Seeker, honestly.
Yeah, well, he can Guzma, bring up the other Tapu Lele, and knock that thing right out.
And sure enough, Frank Diaz takes game 2 here, as both players are now tied at 1 game apiece with about 15 minutes remaining, give or take. So not a ton of time left for this 3rd game, but it is down to the wire, and a draw would potentially eliminate both of these players from the top 8 competition. So you have to believe that they're both going to be playing at lightning fast speeds, trying to get this 3rd game wrapped up before the end of time. But man, what a series so far.
Yeah, this is what we live for. This is the reason why we're at the World Championships. Both these players trying to get those last 3 match points in order to lock up top 8 contention and keep their hopes alive of being the world champion. Jimmy Pendarvis with a win, Frank Diaz with 1 win as well. Both trying to get that very crucial last win here, and both players are going to be playing pretty quickly now with time being so low. And that's exactly what we want to see. We want to see both these players really working for it, trying to earn that top 8 spot.
Yeah, with Jimmy losing the 2nd game here, he will have the opportunity to go first in this 3rd, which is a relative advantage. Definitely nothing that's well, it's definitely an advantage that matters, and we'll have to see if he can take advantage of this situation, as setting up multiple Pokemon and attaching an energy on this first turn will be critical for him, and will solidify him in the lead here in this 3rd and final game. And now Frank Diaz looking at his hand, Jimmy Pendarvis looking at his hand. Looks like Jimmy, I think, is mulliganing and Frank is not.
Yeah, Jimmy found 2 Espeons. That hand would have not been very good for him, so definitely wants to get rid of that. Let's go over and see what Frank's got in his prize cards for us.
Prizes show us a Tapu Lele and a couple of Versus Seekers, but I'm okay with this. The Versus Seekers definitely can hurt, especially given the fact that 1 Versus Seeker is at the very, very top. But, you know, you take this, I think.
Yeah. Jimmy, on the other hand, his hand, he started with Tapu Lele, a lot of item cards. So let's see if his prizes mess with him.
No, Jimmy's prizes are actually really nice for him.
Yeah, that's not too bad. Unfortunately, though, it does draw into another item card, and it's not going to help him out. He can play a lot of this, though.
He's going to Ultra Ball, but is he going to have to Sycamore as well unless he decides to find a Tapu Lele? So it looks like the Ultra Ball is getting rid of one more item, so that's 2 items already in the discard pile.
Yeah, this should be. He doesn't want to.
Well, he's going to Ultra Ball for the Tapu Lele, which is going to find him the end.
Yeah.
Ultra Ball not that strong on its own, but it does get you there. And now he's going to attach a Choice Band, potentially attach a Double Colorless before he ends, but chooses not to. Decides that he wants to save his energy attachments for his normal attackers, which are Espeon and Garbodor. So we see the game plan here from Jimmy. Will it pay off?
Yeah, this is an interesting route. He had the option to go for Bridget. He had an energy in his hand as well, and he had a VS Seeker, which meant that he could go for the Sycamore that he placed in his discard pile, but all of that meant that he probably played a little too many items than he felt comfortable playing.
Yeah.
So he went with this route instead, hoping to find some basic Pokemon, but I don't see any. Maybe that Tapu Lele, but yeah, he doesn't want to add a third.
So Tapu Lele gets a Psychic Energy attached to it instead of the Double Colors that he had in the original hand, but that's just because Jimmy's hand did not really cooperate with him after he drew for that end. And now it's on Frank to see if he can take advantage. He has a couple of Trubbish in his bench already with a Drampa in the active position, so this is a great start for Frank before he even got to draw his card. But now that he does, we'll have to see if he can keep that up. Seeing your opponent with only a Tapu Lele with the energy is very important for you and very nice if you are Frank or a Frank Diaz fan. And an N here from Frank.
That bailed Jimmy out so much.
Yeah,
his
really
hand
did.
was going nowhere fast.
It really, really did. But there's no real way for Frank to know that outside of the energy attachment onto the Lele.
Right. Yeah. It's. I mean, when you see your opponent play nothing else but his energy, probably means they have something in their hand that they just weren't allowed to play, like supporter cards. But in that case, he just didn't have it. Frank now looking over his new hand. Looks like he's found some of his tech supporter cards and an Ultra Ball. So he would have to play some items in order to continue to draw cards in the coming turns.
I think at this point you probably just... I might even Big Wheel, honestly. But he's deciding to put the pedal to the metal, dealing 50 damage to this Tapu Lele, taking advantage of his Choice Band. The reason I would have considered Big Wheeling is because you're going to have to Ultra Ball anyways for the Tapu Lele on the following turn.
Right.
So you might as well just kind of spend this turn. I don't think that 50 damage is going to be all that relevant onto this your opponent's active Tapu Lele with no energy on it. But we'll have to wait and see as Jimmy Pendarvis now continues his own turn, attaches a Double Colorless Energy and a Choice Band onto the active Lele. So what do I know? And now benches a third Tapu Lele.
Yeah, we'll see what he's eyeing up. It looks like he's going to eye the N too, so Big Wheel would have been punished. He wanted to use this N here regardless. Both players now kind of in a weird spot. Jimmy's going to put on some aggression with Tapu Lele and get 90 damage onto the Drampa. And Frank's in a spot where he doesn't really want to commit anymore to this Drampa, but attacking removes the Double Colorless energy. So they're both going to use these attacks that aren't doing too much, but keeping each other in the game.
Couldn't have said that better myself. Jimmy Pendarvis now looking at his new hand. His new hand at least includes a Garbodor and a Trubbish, so it's got some Pokemon, but it doesn't have energies.
Frank might be lined up for his patented play of Ultra Ball for Shaman, Plumeria, get rid of an energy, and Shaman for 6.
It's never a bad play.
Yeah, we do see 90 damage come down over from Jimmy Pendarvis' side.
Okay. I was going to look at those at those dice and say there's no way nine items are in Jimmy Pendarvis' discard pile, but luckily we fixed that.
Yeah, Frank's going to look over his options here.
Ultra Ball here gets rid of a one item here from Frank.
Yep. Frank's just going to take a look at his hand, see what his best option is.
Finds that Shaman.
I think I called it.
Yeah, I think you did too. Now the problem is though,
this does play items.
Yeah, it plays some items, but I think, it's still important to get rid of that Double Colorless Center, or get rid of the energies from your opponent's field. Obviously, you can Righteous Edge away the Double Colorless and maybe get rid of the Psychic on the Tapu Lele. There's a couple of plays you can make, but is it strong?
Yep. Oh, Frank does want to get those Trubbish down, so he's going to hold the Plumeria for after the Shaman here. Gets himself 5 fresh cards and can look at what the best option is to discard here. Maybe he doesn't have to discard some item cards that he doesn't want in his discard pile.
Sure, and he may actually not even want to go for the Plumeria after all. He does have a Field Blower, which increases both players' discard piles worth of item cards, as now there's 4 for Jimmy and 2 for Frank. But if he found a different supporter, he could very well play say an N or a different supporter card here. But the Plumeria is definitely a potential choice, and sure enough, he goes for the Plumeria, gets rid of that Psychic Energy on Tapu Lele. And one more item in the discard pile for Frank. That's up to 3.
Yep, and with under 10 minutes on the clock, Jimmy is run out of energies in the opening turns. Frank over here has 2 energies down, working on some Garbodors, and it's really up to Jimmy now. He's got to find some answers. He lost his choice band, so a double colorless energy has to also have a choice band in order to combat this Drampa. It's also a lot to add to a Tapu Lele that already has 100 damage on it. So big turn here for Jimmy. He's going to have to turn the tides here.
Yeah, the advantage is squarely in Frank's favor here, as Ultra Ball here from Jimmy is going to bring the 5th item into the discard pile here for Jimmy.
I think Jimmy's going to have to look out for Tapu Lele number 4, honestly. His hand it ran dry, so having this 4th Tapu Lele, we're going to see come in handy again for him.
The 4th Tapu Lele here for Jimmy. It's a Tapu Lele deck.
Yeah.
Finds him a Sycamore. Jimmy's at the point of no return at this point. He has no Eevees whatsoever in play. Just struggled to find them.
Yep, I do believe he has a Floatstone in his hand. He can attach that to the active and then just dump the rest of his hand if he wants to. Can also attach to this Trubbish if he finds a Garbo, if he finds a Trashalanche and a Choice Band, he would have a knockout that way as well.
Frank looking at Jimmy's discard pile. Yeah, he does have a couple of options still available to him. I'm not sure how strong his hand is. I see a Garbodor at least.
Yeah, I don't think he hit it. He also had the option if he hit a Field Blower, that would have been enough to get the damage perfectly for himself there, but wasn't able to find it. Ran into some kind of awkward cards for himself.
No Choice Band either, right?
Yeah, not that I saw. He has a 3 Psychic Energy, a Parallel City Gym, Rescue Stretcher.
Well, the Parallel City could be pretty nice for him. Gets rid of that damage on the Tapu Lele.
Yeah, that could be very beneficial for him if he wants to remove that. He might wait to do it in a later turn.
Maybe. Seems like he will. Okay. And just deal 60 damage to Drampa. Just not enough to knock it out. This is so important. He was just a choice band away from knocking it out, basically.
Yeah, and this is a weird spot for Jimmy. He doesn't want to... He has a hard time finding a way to do 30 damage from this point on without bringing in a Garbodor to get knocked out immediately by Frank's Garbodor, or attaching another double colorless energy to a Tapu Lele and continuing that again. He doesn't have cards like Shaman in order to use that Sky Return, bring it back up in your hand and be protected, like Frank has that option.
Looks like Frank had a Versa Seeker, I believe. And if he did, then he now has 4 items in his discard pile. But Frank is in the driver's seat here still.
Looks like he's going to add to that pile too. He's got the Ultra Ball in his hand. Could be getting rid of the Garbotoxin Garbodor if he wants to. He does have a Floatstone on a Trubbish though, so if he wants to lock in Garbotoxin, that is available to him as well. But you've already seen your opponent play 4 Tapu Lele. What abilities are they going to use?
Looks like Frank's past the point of no return himself.
Like Garbodor, not Big Wheel.
Good old Big Wheel.
All right. A simple Big Wheel for the turn. Well,
I mean, Jimmy's hand doesn't beat Big Wheel right now. He has no supporter in his hand. He's kind of just stuck taking these free prizes that Frank is happy to give him, and we're going to see if he has the cards to stay into a Garbodor Trashalanche fight.
that turn could have definitely gone worse for Jimmy, though. I think as far as turns go, obviously, giving your hand, you definitely don't want to be seeing your opponent big wheel. But, I mean, losing your one Garbodor would have been potentially even worse.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's just not an enviable spot here for Jimmy, as it seems like he can do no right in this match, in this third game. Nothing really going his way yet. Has to have all 4 Tapu Leles in play. No Espeons in sight. But he does have a couple of Garbodor. That's the bright side of things.
Yeah, he's going to need to find something useful from these 2 prize cards that he's going to get here off of this Drampa GX. He has cards like Rescue Stretcher in his hand, so that means he can bring Garbodors back onto the field if he wants to in the later stages, but it's going to be pretty difficult to orchestrate all of this when you don't have Tapu Leles.
And there's that Parallel City.
Yeah, we're going to see Jimmy put these Tapu Leles into the discard pile, which also means that they're available to shuffle back into the deck if he wants to with Rescue Stretcher, or just to have that option of using Rescue Stretcher, grabbing a Lele, which means any supporter you need.
And down goes Drampa as Jimmy Pendarvis takes a 4-6 prize lead in this third game. But with 4 minutes remaining, now is when Frank's got to start putting the pedal to the metal here and really start taking some prizes against Jimmy. Remember, 4 minutes is not a very long time, and that really only secures a couple of turns for each of these players, if that.
Yep, well, Frank does have a lot of cards here available to him. It just, what are the best options for him? He has Plumeria in his hand that he's eyeing up. He can remove the Psychic Energy on the benched Garbodor and knock out the active Garbodor as well. I believe Jimmy does have more Psychic Energy in his hand, though, so...
All I know is he really has to speed things up.
Yeah,
really,
that's right.
really badly. 3 minutes and 40 seconds remaining now. Remember, a draw for both of these players would potentially eliminate both of them. More than likely would, actually. And Frank here just wants to avoid that from happening, especially because it seems like he's in the lead here. If you get to get rid of that energy on the benched Garbodor like he did and knock out the active Garbodor, you could potentially lock your opponent out of the game. You know that your opponent's been struggling to draw pretty much throughout the last couple of turns. And with your kind of a setup, you can really take over this game as long as Jimmy does not top deck out of it. And just as I say that, he finds a Sycamore off the top of his deck.
Yep, he was able to find one off of the prize cards too, and we're going to see the Rescue Stretcher start to come into play here. Jimmy does have an option of shuffling them back into his deck, trying to grab them off of the Sycamore here for himself, or he can just grab one piece, and it looks like he is going to shuffle in the 2-1 line of the Garbodor and just hope to draw into this. He does only have one bench space left, however, so Trubbish is going to be a pretty key draw for him to stay in the Trashalanche fight.
2 minutes and 30 seconds remaining in this game. How many more turns will each of these players get, and will it be enough? I mean, it seems like we're entering the stage of the game where we're just going to be trading haymakers, but will they enter that stage of the game fast enough? It's a little over 2 minutes remaining. 7 cards drawn here for Jimmy.
Yeah, if we had 5 minutes, I'd say that
Mine's
there's
that Trubbish, by the way.
a lot of time, but yeah, 2 minutes is starting to get scary. Luckily for Jimmy, he was able to find that Trubbish, keeps him alive here. But
yeah, that was a big-time draw for Jimmy.
And also found another Rescue Stretcher, too. So he'll be able to pull the Trashalanche Garbodor out of the discard pile and stay in the fight if he wants to.
Under 2 minutes remaining. Under 2 minutes remaining, Kyle. This is really getting intense. It's getting close, and you can feel the tension as both of these players feel like they're still in it, but you have to believe that time's got to be on both of their minds. Field Blower gets rid of the Parallel City and one of the, I believe it was a choice band. Yeah, a choice band from his Drampa. And now Jimmy Pendarvis potentially about to knock out the active Garbodor here from Frank Diaz. 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining as Jimmy Pendarvis does knock out this Garbodor. And now Frank Diaz promotes his Garbodor from the bench. And Jimmy Pendarvis is down to 3 prizes. Frank still has 5 remaining.
Yeah, I don't know if they have enough time to be moving around like this. Frank has to get going here. He needs to take a knockout this turn, and then he would also need to be able to take 2 Tapu Lele off of the board in consecutive turns. That means he needs to have Guzma Choice Band Energy back to back, and that's very difficult to ask. Jimmy on the other side, it looks like if he's able to continue with these Garbotoxin Garbodors, or with the Trashalanche Garbodors rather, he's going to be able to take these knockouts. So Jimmy in a more favorable spot, but Frank has to pick up the pace.
It does seem that way. 30 seconds remaining now as Frank is still contemplating his decision. Frank actually retreats, brings up the Trashalanche Garbodor. That's his only potential Trashalanche Garbodor in remaining. and Frank takes his prize, knocks out this Garbota from Jimmy Pendarvis, and we've already seen that Jimmy's got pretty much everything he needs. 15 seconds remaining. Will Jimmy be able to end his turn before time is called? That's the real big question here. Jimmy contemplating his potential benched Eevee. He does do so. He knocks out this Garbota, takes his prize. Will Frank promote before time is called? It seems like he does so. It seems like Frank does promote before time's called. And that means that turn 0 will be on Frank Diaz and not on Jimmy Pendarvis. And you see,
wow, that's big for Jimmy. Just in the nick of time. He had 2 seconds there. That means that he has 2 turns now to find himself 2 prize cards. There's a Shaman EX sitting on the bench right there.
That was crucial. Honestly, that came down. I mean, you saw the excitement out of Jimmy as he kind of just punched his own knuckles in joy almost. Very, very happy to know that he has the 2 turns remaining and not just one, because Frank did promote his Pokemon 2 seconds or so before, or maybe even 1 second before time was called. Could not have been any closer. That was about as close to finish as you can get there. And Frank Diaz still has 4 prizes remaining. He's not out of this game. He's not. But it looks much more difficult for Frank Diaz to get a victory than it does for Jimmy. Jimmy actually pretty much just has to avoid getting unlucky here in order for him to win this match.
All right, so Frank did not hit a Trubbish. He needed to hit a Trubbish last turn. When he saw his cards, he needed to continue to have Trashalanche available to him if he wanted to score easy knockouts. This doesn't mean that he has no way of winning the game. The fact that he has Drampa available to him means that he can use an energy and a choice band with a Guzma, take out a Tapu Lele, and as long as he isn't return knocked out, which technically he isn't knocked out by a Trashalanche just yet, Jimmy is 1 item short or 1 choice band away from being able to knock out a Drampa. That means that Frank would have another turn to then use a Guzma and take out the other Tapu Lele and win the game.
Right, and Frank has to go for the win here, right? Like, you don't want to go for a draw.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. You have to promote. You have to go for that.
Right. Like, you can obviously go for the draw, knock out the Garbota, et cetera, hope. But that's not what Frank's trying to do. Frank isn't trying to earn a top 16 finish. Both of these players are well aware that it's top 8 or bust for them. So, Frank does retreat that Garbota, promotes that Drampa, passes the turn. And a Guzma brings up that Shaman. Handshake extended. Jimmy Pendarvis wins this game against Frank Diaz, and we believe he advances to the top 8 of the Pokemon Trading Card Game World Championships.